Thanks for joining me for this edition of the Author's Corner, brought to you by KNEO 91.7 FM The Word. I'm Roberta Foster, and today I'm welcoming Greg Hershberg back to Author's Corner. You heard the first part of his book's story last week. Now we're going to get into a lot more detail about the spiritual things that he went through, as well as the healing process. And he's written that in his book, At Death's Door, which is published by Aneko Press. And of course, he'll tell you more about how to find the book at the end of the program. Just another quick look at who this guy is that we're talking to. He's actually Rabbi Greg Hershberg and leads the Beth Yeshua International, a global messianic ministry with congregations across 6 continents. He was raised in Orthodox Judaism in New York City, but while on his honeymoon in Israel, he had an encounter with Jesus that changed his life. And you can hear more about that by going back to part 1. Greg, thanks for joining me again on Author's Corner.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Roberta. Really do.
Okay, so I'm going to just read to our listeners a little bit about what you were going through health-wise. November 13th, 2023, at the age of 65, you as a Messianic Jewish leader collapsed in a St. Louis airport. What followed was a 50-plus day ordeal, a life-threatening staph infection in your bloodstream, acute kidney failure requiring dialysis, internal bleeding, and a grueling 12-and-a-half-hour emergency surgery. And a whole lot more was going on there. But the Lord saw fit to bring you through that and give you a story to share with other people. And so what do you feel like your story is that you need to share with folks from that ordeal?
You know, I didn't really want to write a book about it. It was about a year ago. I was in New York. It was a cold, rainy day, and the Lord told me to write it down. And I thought the memoir was going to be for Bernadette and my 4 children. We're a very, very, very close-knit family. My kids and I talk just about every day, at least text, and they're all grown. We're just tight, and they really didn't know what went on. So I wanted them to have this information when I'm gone, because I won't be around forever. I mean, the graft that I have, the axillary bifemoral graft, it doesn't have a long shelf life. That's just the way it is. But then, God said, no, create a book from it. And I see now, in hindsight's 2020, that people are being incredibly comforted in their pain from the book. And this is making me happy, because that means it has redemptive value. And if it didn't have any redemptive value, then it was a horrific thing I went through that I'm still traumatized by. So being that it's helping people, I'm so happy that I went through it for their benefit.
Yeah. Well, there's always a couple of places in the scripture that talk about the comfort with which we've been comforted. We have been able to comfort others. And so that's always such an encouraging word, not necessarily in the moment, but sometimes after the fact. But
for sure,
obviously you went through such a physical ordeal with all of your medical issues, but that wasn't necessarily some of the hardest parts for you. Tell us about some of the most difficult moments for both you and your family, such as when you had to talk to your children before a life-threatening surgery.
Well, that was by far the most difficult moment I've faced in my life. I faced a lot of difficulties. I lost my dad when I was very young. We were incredibly close. I lost my sister. I've dealt with a lot of pain and sorrow. And as a shepherd, I please, for the listening audience, don't take this the wrong way. But if you don't have a shepherd's heart, you got no business being a pastor. Maybe you need to teach at a seminary. But a real shepherd, a calling of a shepherd, is that he can feel the pain of the sheep. That's why the Bible says that God's going to send a shepherd after his own heart, meaning Jesus, because the shepherds of his day were extorting the sheep, sadly enough. So I've been through a lot of pain, but the worst was when the doctor came into ICU the night before the surgery. And, I know him really well at this point. He's done a lot of surgeries on me over 14 years, or 10 years, actually. And he said, he's very gifted. He's Harvard trained. He's brilliant. He's one of the top surgeons, vascular surgeons in the nation. He's fairly stoic. And I said to him, Dr. Dobler, do you think I should call my kids and say goodbye? And I was just kidding. I use humor to lighten, to alleviate some heavy duty things that go on in life. And I was just tongue-in-cheek, just kidding around. I thought he was going to go, nah, Greg, that's not And he said, absolutely. You have a very small chance to live. And it got really heavy at that moment. And calling my 3 children, one was by my side, calling them and having to give them what I thought was my last words. I had to tell them my final, words about how I felt about them and what they mean to me. It was torture. It was awful. I don't wish it on anybody. Nobody should have to do that, but having to do it 4 times. And their responses was responses like, my firstborn, Jeremy, said, Dad, I really tried to never lie to you. You know that? I said, yeah, I know that. And he said, well, I want to tell you I won't be at your funeral. And I said, why? And he said, because a world without you is a world I don't want to live in. So I'm just going to make believe you're in another room. And then my daughter, who's like a mom, stoic, strong woman, one of the strongest women I've ever met in my life. And I've never seen her cry. And she just couldn't contain herself and started wailing and wailing and wailing. And then my 3rd son, Max, said, Dad, everybody loves you. Everybody's rabbi, but you're my rabbi. So what am I supposed to do without you? And then my final daughter said, Dad, you can't die. You're my best friend. What am I supposed to do without my best friend? It was awful.
Yeah.
Painful. And maybe besides that, towards the end, I had a breaking point. Listen, the best of men are men at best. And even Job, who was the greatest, the way he dealt with his sorrow and sadness and suffering was just over the top. But even he, at some point, and we don't have a timeline, but chapter 38, he just couldn't take anymore. And he was confused and in doubt. And he's like, listen, you got to come down here and talk to me. And, it wasn't like, okay, I'll come down and I'll hold you and stroke your hair, which I thought was going to happen when I first read it the first time. But instead, he said, okay, I'll come down. But if I were you, I'd brace myself.
Yeah.
I think we have the wrong image. I think we've made God in our own image, even in the church. And when I say the church, not a denomination, the body of Messiah. I think we want to picture just a good time, Charlie. And I think we want the blessing. We just want the blessing. We want the crown, but we don't want the kiln. We don't want to go through the furnace. But when you're saved, you're mined, but then you have to be refined. And that's just the way it is in God's economy. And a lot of people don't tell us that. When I got saved, I thought it was going to be, grandiose and wonderful, and everything's going to be great. My life was great before. Now it's going to be better. I didn't read. I didn't know the cost of discipleship. Jesus taught it, but we don't teach it too well. We just say, join the club, get the crown.
Well, today I'm talking with Greg Hershberg about his book At Death's Door, which is published by Aneko Press, and you're listening to Author's Corner. I'm Roberta Foster. And I don't know exactly where this was in the timeline of your medical issue, but at one point in time, you tell us in the book that you even asked your wife Bernadette to end your suffering, and you go on to explain that it isn't that you're not faithless, you were depleted, and there's a difference. And so in chapter 3, you talk about the spiritual warfare that you went through, and I can imagine these 2 instances I've already mentioned are probably kind of tied together with the time where you were really battling against Satan because of all the lies he was throwing against you.
It was, the hospital's a rough place. It's dark, especially at night. I couldn't sleep, and when I say couldn't sleep, I slept 15 minutes here, 20 minutes there. Never got a night's sleep. No how, no way. It was just too much pain, too many machines. When I left the hospital the first time, I went home, and a couple of days later, I ended up on life support. I was rushed back. Everything shut down, my kidneys, my lungs, my heart, and I was on life support. Then when I came off that life support, I was in really, really, really awful shape. The pain was too intense. Morphine wasn't working. I wasn't getting better. And Bernadette came to see me like she did every day. And I just said to her, Bern, have I been a good husband? And she said, yeah, really good. And I said, have I been a good dad? She said, the best. I said, Bernadette, have I pretty much done everything God asked of me? Did I question it? Did I pray about it? Or did I go and do? I said, you did. I said, then if you really love me, take the pillow and put it over my face. I couldn't even lift a finger. I couldn't go to the bathroom myself. I couldn't eat. I couldn't drink. I couldn't do anything. And this is not the way I thought I was going to, go off in the sunset at 65. I thought maybe Florida, maybe walks on the beach, maybe some early bird specials, maybe ride my bike. And I just didn't want to do it anymore. Satan had buried me. He kept coming into the room and telling me disgusting things, and I was so depleted. So sometimes the most faithful prayer a person can utter is simply, Father, I have nothing left. And that's the place I reached. Darkness had come upon me, but I was not faithless. I was still talking to him. Mm-hmm. I was exhausted. I had nothing left. And I remember, she said, she tried to kid around and said, I'm not going to do it. Now, Bernadette, I just want your listeners to know there's a measure of faith and there's the gift of faith. Very few people have a gift of faith. They have what's called a measure of faith. There are certain people who, when the water is up to the bottom part of their lip, they still sing songs to God, and they believe he's going to deliver them. That the Bible calls that a gift of faith.
Okay.
It's different than a measure. Bernadette has a gift of faith. I wish I had it. And she stays faithful. She's like, God didn't bring you through this not to pull you out. I said, Bernadette, there's many people that don't come out. Many people in the hospital. People that have better records than me. She goes, I know you're walking out of here. I said, how could you be so glib? When people say that, it hurts. I want to let you in on something. I believe one of the cruelest things we do to people that are going through tumultuous situations is we rush to give a spiritual explanation for their suffering so that we could feel safe as opposed to making the person who's suffering feel seen.
Okay.
Didn't Job's friends do that?
Yep.
They rush with an answer, and don't spiritual people rush with an answer? Well, maybe God. Maybe you shouldn't say maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have any idea what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. And maybe if you shed some tears with me, that might help a little bit. So it's not about you, because Job's friends couldn't handle a God that would allow suffering.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And the prosperity people out there can't handle that. That's not the God they want.
Mm-hmm.
But God has reasons beyond our understanding. We're finite. He's infinite. So we have to sign on now that the Lord is good. He has purposes.
Right.
He'll never leave us nor forsake us. So when it hits the fan, it doesn't bury us.
Right. Well, and fortunately, because of her gift of faith, I'm sure that her words helped a lot for you to grab a hold of and continue going on. But one of the things you mentioned in your book is just how much caregivers suffer in a way that people rarely talk about. What can you share for the caregivers that might be reading your book?
Well, my kids, they still suffer from it. I didn't see any suffering because I was self-absorbed. I was dealing with so many issues that and so many doctors were coming in, Center for Disease Control, and nephrologists, and pulmonologists, and cardiologists, and vascular surgeons, and general surgeons, because they removed part of my jejunum. I had so many people speaking to me, and nurses, and specialists, and respiratory specialists, and that I was self-absorbed, and I didn't realize what Bernadette and the kids were going through. To this day, if I call my kids right now, they jump on the phone and they say, "You okay?"
Yeah.
What's wrong?
Yeah.
So they're traumatized by it, and I'm at a point now where if I go to a hospital, I freeze. It triggers. Mm-hmm. I'm damaged, and I can tell you this: I've been preaching a long time, and people that know me, I've been at Beth Yeshua for 25 years, they say it's totally different now, because there's a big difference between teaching Job and experiencing it. Mm-hmm. There's a big difference between teaching from a book and teaching from your own story. It hits different. You don't speak anymore from your head. You don't speak doctrine. You speak right from your heart, and it gets to people's hearts. And so I think it's important that we be aware that caregiving is painful and traumatic as well. Mm-hmm. And it's nice to ask sometimes, hey, how are you doing?
Right.
You know?
Right. Well, there is a great deal contained within this book called At Death's Door, 50 Days Between Life and Death and the God Who Didn't Leave. And so, Greg, tell our listeners how they can find out more about this book. And, of course, you have many others that are out there available for them.
Yeah, AnekoPress.com, it's a small publishing house because the guys, it's a mom-pa publishing house. He's a devout, crazy believer who gives away tons of books, and I just think God brought him into my life for that purpose. And then, of course, on Amazon, if you look up, Rabbi Greg Hershberg, or at death's door, it will pop up. I'm very, very happy with the reviews that I'm seeing, because they're not just, hey, this is a good book, this is a good read.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be life-giving to a lot of people. I think people are struggling now more than ever. I absolutely believe we're in the last days. The signs are there.
Mm-hmm.
It's obvious to anybody who's spiritually adept and spiritually in tune. And if Satan has very limited time, which he's aware of, it's an all-out onslaught, kind of like what happened with Adolf Hitler when the Allied forces came in. He tried to kill as many Jews as he could in the shortest amount of time. Satan's trying to take out as many believers as he can.
Yeah.
He's turning up the heat, and we have to, stand somehow, believe, just believe that he that started a good work in us will bring it to completion. And we have to put one foot in front of the other and keep walking, because we will finish this. We will finish this race if we keep going forward.
Amen. So one more time, the book is At Death's Door, written by Rabbi Greg Hershberg, and we certainly appreciate him sending us a copy of the book. Greg, it's been so encouraging, even challenging, chatting with you, and sure appreciate your time.
Yeah, I enjoyed the time as well. And thank you very much. I appreciate it so much. God bless you.
And to our listeners, I encourage you to go back and listen to part 1, which you can find it on your favorite podcast platform or through kneo.org. Same place for sharing part 2 with friends that may need this message as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Roberta Foster on the Author's Corner. Join me again next time.